What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So Australia and England have just finished their second test for the July internationals. Now, this was another game not going the way I expected it to be honest. Now, I already did the review for the New Zealand-Ireland game. If you haven't checked that out, feel free to check that out after this video. Now this one, another one, not going the way I expected at all. On the back of last week, where it looked like England just began to fizzle out towards the end, and then I was worried whether or not they'd be able to bring it into this game. We see the second win on the bounce now for the Northern Hemisphere. Can it be a clean sweep? We'll wait and see. So as we do these match reports, we'll be going through the whole game, all the main events and what have you. Now this game was a little bit weird because there was just so many penalties. There were so many penalties. I have 4 pages and almost every word is penalty to one team or another. So it's going to be probably a slightly different review. I'll probably try and condense it down a bit just to be some of the main key areas and some key thoughts on the game. So starting off in the first half, realistically, we get a strong 15 minutes, I would probably say, where I legitimately think it was all England. I'm not even sure what the possession stats were after that 15 minutes, but it must have been getting close to that sort of 80% marker in terms of those first 15 minutes for England. Possession was absolutely amazing for them. Really held onto the ball, were going through the phases. It was sort of like what I announced in the preview video. What I expected from England with the 6-2 split on the bench, I expected forwards to be doing the majority of the work and then having Farrell do all the kicking, or maybe it would have been Marcus Smith, but someone kicking towards the post, just taking every penalty they could, 3 points every opportunity they came along. That's pretty much what happened. The first try of the game not taking long, 5 minutes to get in when Billy Vunipola went over. Lovely driving maul, and it just didn't stop. As soon as it hit the ground, it just kept going. The driving maul this week was absolutely top notch from England. They really worked on that in the last week or so. It felt a little bit 50-50 last week who was winning that forwards battle. This week it just felt like England. Yeah, that driving maul getting him over for the line in that first 5 minutes, and then Farrell getting the conversion as well. So 7-0 at 5 minutes in, an astonishing lead to have. It sort of resembled that first game a little bit. England taking this early advantage, managed to move up the field. England then absolutely jumped on top of this as well, getting a successful penalty conversion in the 10th minute and then another one in the 15th minute. So many penalties coming from Australia in this first quarter. So at 13 minutes in, it's 13-0 to England. They're scoring a point per minute. They were absolutely opening up the floodgates. Australia just struggling to deal with the pressure being put on by England. Some really nice tactics. England felt like a very different team. I know Eddie Jones has spoken a lot about using this as a test series and using the Barbarian games as a test to work on some things. This felt like an England of old sort of deal. This felt like a couple of years ago. England just relying on their kickers and their forwards and just holding their own defence in terms of jackal rates and stuff. That was what it felt more like today. So I don't know whether they've gone back, maybe they tried new things and it hadn't worked, but I think the switch has worked well for them. Australia did get a penalty just after that first 15-minute marker, which was a bit of a weird one. Now, this was a tackle that happened on Nick White. Then after the ball had gone on, we saw Ellis Genge drive his elbow into the back of Nick White and into the grass, and a lot of boos ring around the crowds and stuff. Now this is something, if you've ever played rugby, this happens way more than you think. This just happens, believe me. Any sort of breakdown, someone's getting a little elbow in or whatever. This was awarded as a penalty, and I thought he was a little bit lucky, to be fair. I did think there was a clear tackle to the ground, step 1. I thought there was a clear lift of the arm, step 2, and then an elbow down. Now, I think maybe it wasn't so much a strike as it was like more placing his elbow and driving his head into the ground. But I feel like we've seen them go for yellow cards before. Obviously, there was a tactic in this game, which you saw a little bit often, just to rile up Nick White. He's obviously quite a feisty character. We know how much he talks to the ref and screams and shouts and stuff. So I was obviously in a tactic used by Eddie Jones. This one, so many people just trying to rile Nick White up throughout this game. Some of them paid off a little bit more than others, but I think Ellis Genge got away a little bit lucky there. I could have seen potentially a yellow card. Australia didn't make a lot of it, and England went back on the attack. Australia occasionally were having the ball. They just couldn't really gain anything through this England defence. They were either just kicking away a little bit aimlessly, or they were trying to just use the forwards to get it up. But you had people like Courtney Lawes. In the 20th minute, Courtney Lawes got a lovely jackal penalty. And it wasn't his only one of the game. There was at least 3 or 4. Courtney Lawes was just on it in terms of the breakdown. Being a captain lead from the front, that's absolutely what you want to see. Just after that, England back on the attack won a penalty for Australia being offside. offside. It looked like it was going to go for the 3 points, but the ref was called back to look at a deliberate knock-on done by Isaiah Parise. This is a harsh one. This is just the way the game is going now. If you're going to be the last man trying to attempt an interception, you just can't afford to reach with one arm. I actually think this is an area the game could be worked on a little bit in terms of the rules. I really don't think it was a deliberate knock-on. I think maybe he deliberately and professionally went to interject himself into the ball. But I think the way you get around that is by having the palm upwards, and he did hit the ball. It felt like he slapped it onwards. I didn't deliberately knock it down, which we see sometimes, but I pretty much every single one of those now tends to go the way of a deliberate knock-on. So a yellow card was awarded for that one. Now, they did have a look at whether or not to go for a penalty try there. And I struggle to understand these a little bit. We saw this in the New Zealand-Ireland game. A penalty try wasn't awarded for a tackle off the ball, even though I really think it would have got there. And the same sort of goes for this one as well. If you're going to describe that as a deliberate knock-on, even though I don't think it should have been, if you're going to award the yellow card for the deliberate knock-on, there was one man outside, and I really don't believe there would have been cover there to have got back for that tackle. Andrew Brace... Andrew Brace, I really struggle with watching him as a referee. He gets these unbelievably correct calls in like the middle of a mall. He'll see this most amazing thing. And then some other times he just misses these blindly obvious things throughout this game. There was a number of things he missed in this game. TMOs having to tell him, touch judges having to tell him other things just constantly. So I don't know what happened with this one. I don't know why that wasn't a penalty try. He seemed to believe there was cover. And then he didn't really ask anyone about it. I really didn't think there was any cover for that one. So I might have had a look for a penalty try there. But Farrell did get the penalty kick, taking them to 16-0. We have another 10 minutes of England attack now. Jamie George making a fantastic little break. There's a little kick that came off of an Australian player's face, happened to bounce nicely for him. And Jamie George just running an awfully long way, making some really good room. Passed it out wide for Noel, who managed to get right into that corner. Thought he was going to get over for the try. There was a beautiful last man tackle. I'm not entirely sure who it was. I think might have been Karevi who got back across for that, but absolutely brilliant tackle there. England managing to get another penalty only a few minutes later. That was Australia incorrectly joining the maul. Australia just couldn't deal with the maul today. Farrell kicked that one over for 19-0 with only about 5 minutes left of the half now, and it looked for all certainty it was going to probably be going in at that half time, but out of nowhere Australia finally managed to get their stuff together and managed to finally put something together. They managed to win a penalty at the scrum, an area that England were winning. It was one of the few where Australia managed to win it against the head. They kicked up into the England 22, and there was a very clean line-out. Line-outs actually worked quite well for Australia in this game. They did okay in this one. They used a bit of phase play, and then finally Paisami making good ground, carving all the way through. Huge ground made. Slipper also hitting a really good line from a big man. That's what you want to see. Took them right up to the try line. Was stopped by England, but then Taniela Tupou on the crash ball from about 2 meters out. Really difficult man to stop. Gets him over for the try. And Lolasio gets that conversion. And we went in at halftime 19-7 up just before halftime. Itoje did go off with a head injury. Now the line out was an area England weren't particularly dominating. They were winning a good majority of their own lineouts. They weren't really stealing anything. And losing Itoje, I thought, could have been a big swing in terms of just really struggling in those lineouts. But at halftime, what did I write here? I wrote all England so far. Good pressure, good intensity. They just really had all the attack for the majority of the game. Just going through the phases and pinning Australia back in their own half. So what I haven't mentioned yet, an awful lot of kicking, like I mean when England of old, 2-3 years ago. Awful lot of kicking, just constantly pinning Australia back in their 22, forcing them to play out or kick you the ball back, and then you get to launch an attack. It's the Eddie Jones style. We haven't seen it for a little while. He tried to move away from it a bit, but working very well in this game. And then Australia just struggling to get going. Too many avoidable penalties just everywhere, all over the field. They really need to keep that discipline down. Not really playing very safe. There was one instance they had over their own try line. Rather than just dotting the ball down, they threw it between about 3 players in between their own. Just put the ball down. Just put the ball down and take the scrum. Really dangerous play that doesn't reward you with anything either. And then finally, only one visit to the 22 in that first half. That was the Taniela Tupou try. So although 100% of visits award you a try, international rugby, an entire first half where you're only getting into their 22 once, it's never a good sign. On to the second half then, and very early on into the second half, unfortunately, we saw Parise going off with an injury, basically blowing his knee out from a high ball, landing a bit awkward on the knee. Didn't look very nice at all, looked very, very painful. He had to be taken off the field. So at that point, James O'Connor came on, which meant Lolosio remained at 10 and James O'Connor moved to fullback. Not a position I knew he was going to be fully comfortable covering, but actually had a relatively decent game moving into that fullback. There's an awful lot of switching around in this Australia team since the first test. They've really had to have people ready for an injury status. Just a couple of minutes later, we get the first score of the second half, a successful penalty from Farrell. This was Australia coming in offside. There was a lovely little break from Vunipola at the back of the scrum, making good meters in Australia, just on the scramble defence, not really working for them. Australia did hit back, which was really nice to see very early in the second half. Karevi getting over for the try. Australia managed to win another penalty at a scrum, kicked their way into the corner. England did deal with the maul. The mauling from England today was really good, actually. They'll be very happy with that. Pick and go defence, which England managed to defend pretty well, and then just eventually the ball spread a little bit wide, not enough big boys out wide, and Karevi is a hard man to stop when he gets out there. Got himself over for the try, and Lolosio with a conversion as well. That began a bit of a shift in this game. Now, England have been in charge for a good portion of that entire first half, and even leading a bit into the second half. Now, this is where the switch began. And just after that try, about that 50-minute mark, we really began to see Australia come alive. They got that try, and then they managed to get another penalty after that. Sam Underhill not rolling away. They kicked down into the England 22. A good line out again. Spread it wide. It was shut down. However, it was due to a deliberate knock-on by Marcus Smith that got him a yellow card, which, again, sort of similarly to the first half. I actually think this one was slightly more cynical than the Australia one, because I think he came at it a little bit sideways, a little bit down. I think that one indicated a bit more like he clearly was like, we've got men over here, this needs to be shut down. I don't think he made a genuine attempt for that ball. I think he knew what he was doing. So I probably would have awarded the yellow card for that one and the deliberate knockdown. Lolosio taking the correct move there, just taking the 3 points here in front of the post, absolutely worth it, brought them back to 22-17. Now they're within a score. They've absolutely not been in it the entire game. And then suddenly they're all the way back up to 22-17. They're right back in it now. In the 55-minute, there was an unbelievable box kick from Nick White from in his own half, kicking it all the way to the England 22, bouncing out. Thought it was a brilliant 22. Again, the ref there called it not a 50-22 based on the fact that the player had been tackled into the England half and then brought back. Now, I disagreed with that one as well. Even the TMO looked at it, and it looked to me very much like the player got tackled in his own half, landed in his own half, and then sort of bounced a little bit, and maybe his shoulder hit the halfway line. I really don't think he was by any margin, into the England half. And then even after that, I wasn't aware that there was actually a rule around the ball being brought back into your own half to kick for the 22, because I believe there was a bit of a rule change a few years back about kicking from the 22. It used to be the rule of that you can't pass back into the 22 and then kick it straight out. However, you can pass it to someone, get tackled within your own 22, and then kick it straight out. They changed the rules around that a little bit, around tackling and which side of the line you're on and whether you're allowed to kick it out or not have you. So I need to look into that a little bit myself, but I thought that was a harsh call. I thought that one could have been a really nice 50-22. Australia did actually manage to steal a line out back, though, which was really nice to see, and then Courtney Laws gave away a penalty for being in at the side of the maul there. They kicked right into the corner, and I actually thought Australia were on for potentially some points here. However, just broke down. England just sorting out that Australian maul all day long. They couldn't really get anywhere with it, and then managing to shut down the defensive work was pretty good on the try line, to be fair. So nothing came of it, and they'll be quite annoyed that they didn't manage to come away with some points in that visit. England managed to get round to having a scrum, and they won another penalty at that scrum, really taking charge of them, kicking them up the field, relieving all of that pressure that Australia had just built up. A couple of minutes later, in the 62nd minute, we saw a huge break from Tom Wright, who hadn't been quiet for a lot of the game, but made a fantastic manoeuvre from his own half, making, I don't know, somewhere between 70 and 80 metres probably down the field, ran all the way up to the half-wall line, kicked the ball, over the top of everyone else. Farrell sprinted back like a madman to get back for it. Tom Wright playing it absolutely correctly, leaving Farrell to pick up the ball himself and then dragging him out into touch. Absolutely brilliant play, made really good meters there. Again, didn't really lead to anything, which is a real shame. They got all these fantastic positions, Australia, and just couldn't quite get it to work. I think one of the things that was letting Australia down a bit was there was so many of the same set play from those set pieces, which I think was letting them down. The ball would always seem to go out to the fly half and then pass round the back on this little loop. England eventually began to get wary of it, and about the 60th minute you began to see it. People like Valentini and Karevi were always the people that were going to end up carrying the ball, so England ended up just sort of avoiding the dummy runners and just targeting them, and that really began to take a bit of momentum out of the Australia attack. After 20 minutes of very quiet play from England, just all on the defensive, we finally get to see an England attack coming back. It's the first real attack for a good while now. There was a lovely crossfield kick from Farrell, landing absolutely bang on, over to Noel, who made some really good moved on some pick and goes. Vunipola actually got over the try line, right on the try line, and it was held up by Australia. An awful lot of men putting the bodies on the line there. However, there was a penalty given for offside there. Farrell managed to kick that over, so he got to a 25-17, just taking them beyond that score, that one score, which was so important. 15 minutes left, the game not over by a long shot. There could have potentially been a comeback here, but Australia at this point just felt like they began to lose a bit of momentum. They were being able to win a couple of penalties here, but they just not managing to make the most of it. England got a nice little turnover at one point and then immediately sealed off, giving the opportunity back to Australia, but they were kicking up the field. There was a missed kick that just went dead. It was actually kept in by Danny Kerr, which was a really nice move by him. And Australia just not managing to convert these things into points. A couple of handling errors, a couple of issues at the breakdown. And then right at the end, again, we got in the 72nd minute here, England are on the defensive again, and out of nowhere, Courtney Laws with another brilliant turnover penalty. Just managed to see them game back in control. England just know how to seal out a game normally, so this was one of those sorts of games. Just moved back up the field, kept pinning Australia back. Australia couldn't run it the full length of the field. They did get a penalty right at the end to England, which could have seen them get a little bit more. It was missed by Farrell, but at that point, they're just keeping Australia back. And there was just no way back, unfortunately. So England win their second game of their test against Australia, 25-17. I think as an England fan, I would imagine you're relatively happy with that. There was definitely a period between 45 and 65 minutes where it was beginning to get a bit shaky, bit hairy. Both teams seem to be working on this confidence play now. For whatever reason, both of them seem to want to be the offensive team, and neither of them is particularly being able to deal with the pressure if it's just relentless. I'd say the England defence was probably better in terms of holding their own try line, not conceding those tries, not really conceding those points. Australia tended to be able to hold out, but just gave away too many penalties that allowed the boot of Farrell. I think he had 6 penalties in the end, Farrell. Or converted 6, he had 7 eventually. That's a lot of points. That's 18 points given away by yourselves. You know, that's not a lot of work for England to do if you're just going to keep giving them penalties by not being able to deal with that maul. I thought the physicality from England was much better in this one. They took over the scrums. They took over the driving mauls by far. Driving mauls were England's all day long. I actually think I would say Australia potentially did better in the lineouts, but I just think there was that huge issue at the first half. Half-time was 19-7 to England, and to be honest, with the amount of visits Australia were having, it looked like it could have been 19-0. When you have those sorts of deficits, it's just really hard to come back from it, especially with a team like England. They did the 6-2 split. They were going to put on more forwards. They were going to be able to hold out in terms of defensive capabilities. They knew they just needed to get into the lead and then hold it, and that was pretty much how the game went. It was a real shame. I thought Australia were potentially mounting this massive comeback. It was going to be exactly what we saw last week. But I would imagine, as an England fan, probably pretty happy. But as always, guys, make sure you do drop down in the comments your thoughts on the game, because I really like reading through what people thought of it, whether you're from England or from Australia, or you're a third party, you're completely impartial to the game. Let me know what you thought of the game down in the comments, because I do like having a little bit of a read through them. Like I said, we've already done one review. Feel free to go back and watch the New Zealand one if you haven't already. And if you've enjoyed this one today, remember to leave this video a like. And if you consider subscribing, if you've enjoyed any part of this content, feel free. It's absolutely free to click subscribe. You can always unsubscribe later if you really don't like my content that much. But I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. Soon we've got the Wales and South Africa game coming up. I know that's one of the big ones on the channel at the minute. A lot of people talking about that one. So look forward to that going around. I've got a little bit of time before that one kicks off, but be ready for the match report for that one, because hopefully that's going to be a really exciting game. I hope you all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.